Hi, my name is Martha. I'm 50 years old, and last month I received an email that broke my heart in ways I never thought possible. It wasn't from a stranger, but from my own daughter, the child I had raised single-handedly after my husband passed away. In just a few cold sentences, she told me that I wasn't invited to her wedding. Instead, she said I could watch it on a live stream. That was the moment I knew something had to change, and that she was about to learn a lesson she would never forget. If you've ever felt unappreciated by the very people you sacrificed everything for, you'll understand exactly what I went through. Stay with me, because this story is not just about pain. It's about strength, boundaries, and a revenge my daughter never expected. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and tell me in the comments which city and country you're watching from so I can thank you personally. I wasn't born into wealth or comfort. My life has been a long road of hard work, sacrifice, and choices I never thought I'd have to make. I grew up in a working-class family where luxuries didn't exist. Even small things like new shoes or a vacation felt out of reach. That's why when I got married at 23, I promised myself that my children would never feel the same kind of lack that I did. For a while, life looked good. My husband and I had a small but happy home, and soon after, we were blessed with a daughter. Holding her for the first time was overwhelming. I remember looking at her tiny face and whispering, "You'll never know struggle like I did. I'll make sure of it." Those words became a silent vow that shaped the rest of my life. But life has a cruel way of changing when you least expect it. When my daughter was just 12 years old, my husband suddenly passed away from a heart attack. I went from being a partner and mother to being a widow overnight. The grief nearly swallowed me, but I didn't have the luxury of falling apart. I had a child who needed me. Bills still came in, meals still had to be made, and school fees still had to be paid. So I rolled up my sleeves and got to work. I took on 2 jobs at once, one full-time in an office during the day and part-time shifts at night just to keep us afloat. Vacations? Forget about it. Shopping sprees? Never. Most of my clothes were bought second-hand, and I drove the same car for nearly 15 years because buying a new one was out of the question. Every time I had to choose between myself and my daughter, I chose her. When she wanted to join extracurriculars, I paid for them. When she needed new books, I bought them. When she dreamed of going to college, I worked extra hours to save up for her tuition. There were so many nights when I came home past midnight, exhausted to the bone, only to wake up at 5 a.m. and do it all over again. And yet, every sacrifice felt worth it. I thought, this is what mothers do. One day, she'll understand. I remember once when she was 17, she came home crying because her friends were teasing her about not having the latest phone. I had just enough savings to replace my old washing machine, which was on its last legs. But instead, I used that money to buy her the phone she wanted. I kept washing clothes by hand for weeks until I could save up again. The smile on her face that day. That's what I told myself it was all for. Through her college years, the support didn't stop. She changed majors twice, which meant extra credits and extra fees, but I never complained. I just quietly pulled from my savings. When she decided to move out of state for a job that barely lasted a year, I paid for her moving costs and even her security deposit. When she was heartbroken after a bad breakup, I dropped everything, flew out to see her, and held her hand until she could sleep again. I never kept count. I never thought of it as a ledger where she owed me anything. I told myself that love was enough, that she'd remember, that one day when she had her own family, she would look back and realize just how much I had given her. But that email, that cold, heartless email, made me question everything. It wasn't just about being excluded from the wedding. It was about what it symbolized. To her, I wasn't her mother anymore. I wasn't the woman who had stood in the shadows of sacrifice for decades. I was just inconvenient. An extra body she didn't want in the room. And the cruelest part, I had already given her $25,000 toward that very wedding. Money I had saved over years, meant for my retirement or maybe finally taking a trip of my own. I didn't hesitate when she asked for help, because that's what mothers do, right? They give. They give until there's nothing left. I sat staring at that email for hours. At first, I felt numb. Then came the anger, then the hurt. But under it all, something inside me shifted. A realization I should have had years ago. Love without respect is nothing. And in that moment, I decided that things were about to change. The morning after receiving that email, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. It wasn't the kind of heaviness that comes from crying all night. I hadn't shed a single tear. It was the kind that comes from finally seeing the truth, the kind that settles deep in your bones and whispers, "Things will never be the same again." I sat at my kitchen table sipping coffee that had already gone cold, staring at the words on the screen as if they might change if I blinked long enough. You can watch it online. It'll be just like being there. Just like being there? Number nothing could ever replace the feeling of seeing your child walk down the aisle. Nothing could replace the pride of being acknowledged as the mother who raised her. And yet, in her eyes, I was no longer worthy of a seat. I thought about all the nights I stayed awake balancing bills. I thought about the vacations I never took, the clothes I never bought, the dreams I shelved away so she could chase hers. And now, I wasn't even worth the price of a chair at her wedding. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat there in silence, and something inside me hardened. The world outside my window looked the same. Cars driving by, neighbors walking their dogs, the morning sun creeping higher. But my world had shifted. In that moment, I realized I was done pretending that sacrifice automatically earned respect. I was done believing that unconditional love meant unconditional acceptance of disrespect. Later that day, my phone began buzzing. At first, it was a text. "Mom, did you see my email? Please understand, it's Andrew's parents' decision." Then another. "We'll make it special for you online. Don't take it personally." Don't take it personally? How else could I take being excluded from my own daughter's wedding? By evening, the calls started. Her name lit up my screen over and over, but I didn't answer. What would I even say? That I was proud of her? That I forgave her? Number I wasn't ready to play the role of the quiet, compliant mother anymore. That night, as I washed dishes, I noticed a folder of paperwork sitting on the counter. Receipts, contracts, bank transfers. Proof of every dollar I had already poured into her wedding. $25,000 gone, and she still had the audacity to tell me I wasn't welcome. My hand froze mid-wash, soap dripping into the sink. And that's when the decision hit me like a lightning bolt. I wasn't going to fight with her. I wasn't going to beg for a seat. I wasn't even going to raise my voice. I was going to act. The next morning, I drove straight to the bank. The manager, who had known me for years, greeted me warmly. "Mrs. Anderson," he said, "what brings you in today?" I smiled politely, though my heart pounded in my chest. "I'd like to cancel a scheduled transfer," I said firmly. "It hasn't gone through yet, has it?" He tapped on his keyboard, scanned the screen, then nodded. "No, it's still pending. You just made it in time. May I ask why?" I leaned back in my chair, my voice calm but sharp as glass. "Because circumstances have changed." And with that one sentence, I took back control. I signed the necessary papers, walked out of the bank, and breathed in the crisp morning air, like it was the first breath of freedom I'd had in years. For once, I wasn't giving. For once, I wasn't sacrificing. For once, I was choosing myself. That afternoon, the messages on my phone turned frantic. "Mom, the venue says they didn't receive the payment." Another came minutes later. "Please don't do this. Andrew's parents are furious. We could lose everything." Still, I said nothing. I simply poured myself a glass of wine, sat on my porch, and let the silence speak for me. Because sometimes silence is the loudest lesson of all. By the time evening rolled around, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Emily had called me over a dozen times, each voicemail more frantic than the last. At first, her tone was sharp, even dismissive. "Mom, the venue said the payment didn't come through. Can you call the bank and fix it? We don't have time for this." But when I didn't respond, her messages shifted. "Please, Mom, this isn't funny. Andrew's parents are furious. They said this proves you can't be relied on. If we lose the venue, it'll ruin everything." Not once did she say she was sorry. Not once did she acknowledge the pain of excluding me from her wedding. Every word was about the money, the payment, the disaster she might face. To her, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was just a bank account that had suddenly closed. By the next morning, my son Luke showed up at my doorstep. Still in his office clothes, sleeves rolled up, looking tired and annoyed. He didn't even greet me with a hug. Instead, the first words out of his mouth were, "Mom, what are you doing?" Emily's in tears. I crossed my arms, standing firm. "She disinvited me from her wedding, Luke. Why would I keep paying for an event I'm not allowed to attend?" He sighed, pacing the living room like a lawyer preparing for a case. "Andrew's family is footing most of the bill. They just wanted it small and traditional. You know how strict they are." I let out a bitter laugh. "Traditional? I've already given her $25,000. Do you know what tradition that is? It's called being taken advantage of." He froze mid-step. "Wait, you already gave her that much?" "Yes," I said coldly. "And she wanted another $25,000 from me this week. But that's over. I canceled it." His face went pale. He ran his hands through his hair, exasperated. "Mom, you can't just pull out like this. They're counting on you." "They?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or Emily?" Because let me tell you something, Luke. Emily made her choice the moment she told me I wasn't good enough to sit in that room. I'm not going to bankroll a wedding where my presence is negotiable. His tone sharpened. "You're being selfish. She's your daughter. This is the most important day of her life, and you're making it about you." For a moment, his words stung. Selfish. I'd spent my entire adult life sacrificing for my children. I'd worked nights, skipped vacations, gone without. All so they could have everything I never had. And now, standing in my own living room, my son dared to call me selfish. That was the breaking point. I took a deep breath, steadying my voice. "Get out, Luke." His eyes widened. "What, Mom? You can't be serious." "I am," I said firmly, pointing toward the door. "I've given everything I had to both of you. But I'm done being the villain in a story I wrote with love. If that makes me selfish, so be it. Get out." He stared at me for a moment, then shook his head in disbelief and walked out. The door closed softly behind him, but it sounded louder than any slam. For the first time in years, I stood in my house and felt something unfamiliar. Freedom. No guilt, no tears, just freedom. But Emily didn't stop. That night, my phone lit up with dozens of messages. Some were passive-aggressive. "I can't believe you do this to me." Others were full of guilt trips. "After everything I've done for you, you're going to ruin my wedding." And then, at 3 a.m., a final desperate one. "Please, Mom. Andrew's parents are threatening to cancel the whole thing. If you don't send the money, I'll lose everything. Why are you doing this to me?" I stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone down without replying. For years, I had been the one to answer every call, fix every problem, rescue every disaster. But not this time. Because for the first time in my life, I understood the truth. I wasn't ruining her wedding. She had already ruined our relationship. And now, she was about to learn that money couldn't buy respect. Not anymore. The days after I canceled the transfer felt strangely calm for me, though chaos swirled all around Emily. I went to work as usual, answering emails, filing documents, and attending meetings. Outwardly, nothing had changed, but inside, I felt like a storm had finally cleared. That morning, my boss, Mr. Hayes, stopped by my desk with a cup of coffee, just the way I liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. He's the kind of man who notices details most people overlook. "You look lighter today," he said, sliding the cup toward me, "like a weight's been lifted." I almost laughed. A weight had been lifted, though it had taken 50 years and a lifetime of sacrifice for me to finally feel it. He didn't press me for details, but I found myself opening up anyway. I told him everything. The email, the exclusion, the money, the way my son had sided with his sister. When I finished, he didn't try to justify Emily's actions. He didn't say, "She's young," or "She doesn't mean it." He simply nodded and said, "Sometimes the hardest love is the love where you draw the line." His words echoed in my head all day. That evening, as I drove home, I found someone sitting on my porch steps. At first, I thought it might be Emily, but as I got closer, I realized it was Sophia, Emily's best friend since grade school. I hadn't seen her in years, but the moment I saw her, memories of sleepovers, giggles, and late-night movies flooded back. She stood up quickly, brushing off her coat. "Mrs. Anderson, I hope it's okay that I came by. Emily doesn't know I'm here." Curiosity got the better of me. "Come in, dear," I said, unlocking the door. "I'll put the kettle on." Inside, she looked around like she was revisiting a place frozen in time. "I don't know if I should be here," she admitted, "but Emily is spiraling. She doesn't know what to do now that the venue canceled. Andrew's parents are furious. They keep saying this proves you don't support her." I handed her a cup of tea and raised an eyebrow. "Support her? I gave her $25,000, Sophia. I supported her when she changed majors, when she moved out, when she came running back after every heartbreak. I have supported her entire life, but apparently none of that counts." Sophia bit her lip. "She knows she hurt you. She's scared. She doesn't know how to fix it." For a long moment, I stared into my tea. Was there anything Emily could do to fix this? Would an apology undo years of being taken for granted? Would a simple "I'm sorry" erase the sting of being told I could watch her wedding through a live stream? Finally, I shook my head. "No, Sophia, there isn't." Her shoulders slumped. "Not even if she apologizes?" I sighed. "Words are easy, sweetheart. They come cheap, especially when someone is desperate. True love doesn't wait until the money is gone to finally see you, and I can't keep pretending that her actions don't matter just because she's my daughter." Sophia nodded slowly, her eyes sad but understanding. "I get it," she whispered, "even if she doesn't." Before leaving, she gave me a quick hug. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "I always thought you were the strongest mom I knew." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the quiet hum of my own thoughts. But the contrast between Sophia's sincerity and Andrew's family's cold greed became even clearer the next day. Emily forwarded me an email chain between her fiancé's parents. I don't know why she thought it would help. Maybe she hoped it would guilt me into relenting. But instead, their words only hardened my resolve. The chain was brutal. Andrew's mother had written, "This is why we didn't want her involved. Martha doesn't know her place. If she truly loved Emily, she'd pay without question. Her behavior is embarrassing. Embarrassing. That was the word she used to describe me. The woman who raised Emily alone, who poured her life into giving her daughter everything. To Andrew's mother, I was nothing more than an obstacle, an inconvenient reminder that money doesn't grow on trees. I read those words over and over, then quietly closed the email. Number, I wouldn't be guilted. I wouldn't be shamed. And I certainly wouldn't pay for respect that should have been mine all along. For years, I had allowed myself to fade into the background, believing that love meant sacrifice. But sitting there, with Mr. Hayes's kind words in my memory, Sophia's honesty fresh in my mind, and Andrew's mother's cruel dismissal echoing in my ears, I felt something powerful take root inside me. For the first time, I saw myself not just as a mother or a widow, but as a woman who deserved dignity. And I knew this battle wasn't just about Emily's wedding anymore. This was about teaching everyone, Emily, Luke, Andrew's parents, that my worth could never ever be measured in dollar signs. After weeks of silence, something inside me began to shift. I had already canceled the transfer, and that decision had shaken Emily's carefully built wedding plans to the core. But I knew this wasn't enough. For too long, I had played the role of the quiet provider, always giving, always sacrificing, always stepping aside. Now it was time to do something different. I wanted them to learn, to truly feel the weight of their actions, and for that, I needed more than silence. I needed a plan. It started with the contracts. Over the years, I had handled most of Emily's big expenses, tuition, apartments, even her first car. I had copies of receipts, contracts, and even a few legal documents tied to some of the wedding vendors since I was the one who made initial deposits. Those papers weren't just records. They were leverage. I sat at my kitchen table one evening, papers spread out like puzzle pieces. The Napa Valley venue contract had my name on it as the payer. The florist's invoice had been processed through my account. Even the photographer's deposit carried my signature. In other words, they weren't just her vendors. They were mine too. With every piece of paper I laid out, a sharper picture formed. Emily had excluded me from her wedding, but the truth was simple. Without me, there would be no wedding. That realization filled me with a cold kind of calm. The next step was information. I called the venue directly. "Hi, this is Martha Anderson. I made the initial deposit under contract number 4572. The woman on the other end confirmed it immediately. I asked a few questions, subtly steering the conversation, and soon I learned that unless the balance was paid within 2 weeks, the reservation would be canceled and the deposit forfeited. Perfect. Then I called the florist. Same story. Final payment. Due soon or everything was off. The photographer? Same thing. Every single vendor held deadlines that Emily couldn't possibly meet without my help. And I had no intention of helping, but simply standing back wasn't enough. I wanted her to see crystal clear what happens when you treat the person who gave you everything like a disposable option. So I made one final call, this one to Andrew's parents. His mother's voice was sharp, clipped. "Martha," she said coldly, "I hope you've come to your senses. This whole fiasco is humiliating." I took a deep breath, keeping my tone calm. "Actually, I just wanted to let you know that I've withdrawn completely from all financial involvement. The contracts were in my name, the deposits from my account. When the deadlines pass, they'll be canceled. So if you're counting on me to save this wedding, you're wasting your time." There was a long silence on the other end, then a scoff. So you're going to ruin your own daughter's big day out of spite? I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Number. I'm not ruining anything. Emily made her choice. Actions have consequences. I'm just choosing not to protect her from them anymore. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch, the spring air cool against my skin. For the first time in years, I wasn't anxious about what my children needed from me. I wasn't bracing myself for another guilt trip. I was calm, empowered. Over the next week, the fallout began. Emily's frantic texts grew more desperate. Mom, please, the florist canceled. We don't have flowers anymore. Then another. The venue is threatening to give our date away. Can you at least pay half? Please. Each time, I read the messages and then set my phone down. Silence was my answer. But the real satisfaction came the day she finally wrote, Andrew's parents say this is all your fault. They say you don't care about me. I stared at the screen for a long moment before replying with just one sentence. I care about you, Emily, but I will no longer pay to be disrespected. No anger, no pleading, just truth. And with that, I felt the shift inside me solidify. This wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. I wasn't out to destroy her life. I was out to teach her something she had clearly never learned, that love is not a blank check, and respect cannot be bought. By the end of the month, her grand wedding plans had collapsed. The Napa Valley dream was gone. The florist, the photographer, the elegant ballroom, all gone. What remained was a small backyard ceremony hastily thrown together, a far cry from the lavish event she and Andrew had envisioned. And me? I wasn't invited. But this time, I didn't need to be, because the lesson had already been taught. The first sign that my decision had taken root came 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday afternoon. I was at work, flipping through files, when my phone buzzed nonstop on the desk. I glanced down. 12 missed calls from Emily, 3 from Luke, and 1 from an unknown Napa number. I already knew what it meant. The venue had officially canceled. I leaned back in my chair, letting the quiet satisfaction wash over me. For months, Emily and Andrew had boasted about their elegant Napa wedding, how it would be the talk of the town, how Andrew's parents wanted it to be the event of the year. Now, all of that was gone with a single stroke of a pen, or rather, with my refusal to sign another check. That evening, Emily finally showed up at my house. Her hair was disheveled, eyes red from crying. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. She stormed into the living room, her voice trembling with anger. "How could you do this to me, Mom?" she demanded, tears spilling over. "Do you have any idea what you've done? The venue dropped us, the florist pulled out, the photographer canceled. Do you want to see me humiliated? Is that what this is about?" I sat calmly on the couch, my wine glass balanced between my fingers. "No, Emily," I said evenly. "This isn't about humiliation. It's about respect. You disinvited me from your wedding. You told me I wasn't welcome, except behind a computer screen. You treated me like a bank account, not a mother. And now you're surprised that the bank is closed." She froze, her chest heaving. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," I cut in. My voice was steady, firm, but not unkind. "You made a choice, and choices have consequences. You can't exclude me from your life until you need my money, then come running when things fall apart." Her lips trembled as she tried to form a response, but the words caught in her throat. For the first time in years, she had no argument, no manipulation to throw at me, just silence. Days later, the whispers began to reach me through mutual friends. Andrew's parents were livid. They had invested in a few smaller expenses, but the backbone of the wedding had always been my contributions. Without them, the entire plan collapsed. The caterer demanded full payment up front since the venue canceled. Andrew's parents refused. The vendors walked away one by one until all that was left was the backyard of Andrew's family home. On the day of the wedding, while Emily prepared for her big day, I spent the morning gardening, hands deep in the soil, planting roses I had been meaning to put in for months. It was peaceful, grounding, and far more fulfilling than sitting in the back row of a ceremony where my presence was barely tolerated. By late afternoon, my phone buzzed again. It was Luke. Against my better judgment, I answered. "You won," he said bitterly, his voice low. "She's devastated. The wedding is a joke now, a few tables in the backyard. Are you happy?" I wiped the dirt from my gloves, shaking my head. This was never about winning, Luke. It was about finally drawing a line. Your sister needed to understand that love is not transactional, that you can't discard people and expect them to keep giving. He exhaled sharply. "She'll never forgive you." I smiled faintly. Maybe not, but one day, when she's older, when she has children of her own, she'll understand. And whether she forgives me or not, I finally forgave myself for letting her treat me this way for so long. When I hung up, I felt lighter than I had in years. Later, a neighbor mentioned that the wedding had been awkward, with Andrew's mother barking orders, Emily crying through most of the reception, and half the guests whispering about the drama. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Life had already delivered the lesson. For me, revenge didn't look like shouting or lawsuits or grand displays of anger. It looked like quiet dignity. It looked like walking away from a stage where I was no longer respected and letting the silence echo louder than words ever could. And in that silence, my daughter finally heard me. In the weeks after Emily's wedding collapsed, life in my house felt strangely quiet. Not the heavy, suffocating silence of grief or anger, but a lighter, calmer silence, like the air after a long storm. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next demand, the next crisis, the next way to sacrifice myself. Emily didn't call me for nearly 3 weeks. Luke checked in once, but his voice was clipped, cold. "She's not doing well," he said flatly. "Andrew's parents are furious and she blames you for everything." Then, without waiting for my reply, he hung up. Part of me ached at his words, because despite everything, Emily was still my daughter. But another part of me, the part that had been trampled on for decades, knew better. She wasn't ready to take responsibility yet, and maybe she never would. One evening, while I sat on the porch sipping tea, an email notification popped up on my phone. The subject line read, "I don't understand." It was from Emily. I opened it cautiously, scanning the long message. She poured out her frustration, her humiliation. She wrote about how the Napa dream had turned into a backyard disaster, how Andrew's parents looked at her with disappointment, how her friends whispered behind her back. "I needed you, Mom," she wrote, "and you abandoned me. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for this." I set the phone down and stared out at the fading sunset. Abandoned. That word cut deeper than I expected. After all those years of giving, she still saw me as the one who walked away. But as the minutes passed, the sting faded. I realized something important. She wasn't capable of seeing the full truth yet. Her perspective was clouded by entitlement, by the belief that love equaled endless sacrifice. And until she learned otherwise, no amount of explaining would make her understand. So I didn't respond. I archived the email, not in anger, but in peace. Instead, I began to focus on something I had long neglected, myself. I signed up for a pottery class on Saturdays, something I had always wanted to try but never had time for. I started walking in the mornings before work, letting the crisp Oregon air fill my lungs as the sun rose. I picked up novels I hadn't touched in years, letting myself get lost in other people's stories instead of drowning in my own disappointments. At the office, Robert noticed the change. "You seem lighter these days, Martha," he said one afternoon as we shared coffee, happier even. I smiled softly. Maybe I finally learned how to set boundaries. He nodded thoughtfully. Boundaries are the hardest form of love, especially with family. His words stuck with me. Because he was right. Walking away hadn't meant I stopped loving Emily. It meant I loved myself enough to stop bleeding for someone who refused to see my worth. The neighborhood, of course, buzzed with gossip. Some people whispered that I was cruel. Others quietly admired me, though they didn't say it out loud. But none of that mattered. For the first time in decades, I wasn't living for approval. And then, one Sunday, Sophia, Emily's childhood friend, Nikani, came by. She carried a bouquet of flowers, awkwardly standing at my doorstep. "Mrs. Anderson," she said softly, "I just wanted to say, I get it. Emily might not, but I do. You deserved better." Her words brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I hugged her tightly, grateful for her kindness. It reminded me that even if Emily couldn't see it yet, others could. As the months passed, the sharp sting of betrayal dulled into something quieter. Not forgiveness, at least not yet, but acceptance. I no longer replayed the hurtful emails in my mind. I no longer second-guessed my choices. I simply lived. Looking back, I realized the true revenge wasn't the collapse of Emily's wedding, though that had certainly been a lesson. The real revenge was reclaiming my life, refusing to be used, and showing myself, and Emily, that love without respect isn't love at all. Maybe one day she'll understand. Maybe one day she'll call me, not for money, not for help, but simply because she misses me. Until then, I'll keep planting roses in my garden, shaping clay at the pottery wheel, and reminding myself of the truth I wish I had learned sooner. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. As the seasons changed and months slipped quietly by, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. The disinvitation, the broken wedding plans, the desperate emails, and finally the silence that followed. At first, I thought my revenge had been about teaching Emily a lesson, but the truth I uncovered was much bigger than that. The real lesson wasn't for her. It was for me. For so long, I had equated love with sacrifice. I believed that being a good mother meant giving until there was nothing left, that my worth was measured in how much I could provide. Every extra shift I took, every birthday I skipped, every dollar I funneled into my children's dreams, I thought it was proof of my devotion. But standing on the other side of this painful chapter, I realized something liberating. Unconditional love doesn't mean unconditional tolerance. Love does not mean allowing yourself to be disrespected, overlooked, or used. Love must have boundaries. Without them, it becomes a transaction, and that's not love at all. I learned that saying no wasn't cruel. It was necessary. It was an act of self-preservation. And strangely, it was also the purest act of love I had left to give. Because by stepping back, I forced Emily to confront her choices, to see what happens when you treat people as disposable. Whether or not she ever truly learns from it, I can't control. But what I can control is myself, my peace, my dignity. And I've come to understand that dignity is priceless. Looking back, I also realized how often women, mothers especially, are expected to give endlessly. Society romanticizes sacrifice, praising mothers who give up everything for their children, as if erasing yourself is the highest form of love. But nobody tells you the cost of that erasure. Nobody tells you that one day you might wake up and realize the people you gave everything to don't see you at all. That was the hardest truth of all. I had raised children who never stopped to see me as a person. But here's the other side of that truth. It's never too late to step out of the shadows of other people's needs. It's never too late to reclaim yourself. These days, my mornings look different. Instead of rushing to solve someone else's problem, I start with a walk, feeling the air on my skin, listening to the quiet rhythm of my own breath. In the evenings, I shape clay into bowls and vases, imperfect but uniquely mine. I share meals with friends who ask about my day, not about my checkbook. And every time I plant a new rose in my garden, I feel like I'm also planting a piece of myself I once buried under obligation. Do I miss Emily? Of course. There are nights when I still wonder if she'll ever call me just to talk, not to ask for something. There are moments I remember her as a little girl, her hand in mine, her laughter filling our tiny kitchen. But then I remind myself, the little girl I raised has grown into a woman who must face the consequences of her own choices. I can love her, but I cannot live her life for her. And that is the moral of this story. Love is strongest when it's balanced with respect. Sacrifice without recognition only breeds resentment. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. They teach others how to treat us. If you've ever found yourself in my position, giving endlessly until you're empty, silencing your own needs for the sake of others, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not selfish for wanting respect. You are not cruel for saying enough. And you are not unloving for putting yourself first. Because love that destroys you isn't love. It's dependency. And the bravest thing you can do is walk away from it. In the end, I didn't ruin Emily's wedding. She did, by forgetting the very person who built the foundation for her dreams. All I did was step aside and let reality do the teaching. And perhaps one day she will see it for what it truly was, not revenge, but a reminder. A reminder that family isn't defined by money or appearances or control. Family is defined by respect. And until she learns that, my silence will remain my loudest answer.